Good morning, friends. Welcome to Word of Gord, OBEJournal 2019, number 7. And we're going to basically continue on some themes from number 6, where I contacted Stanton Friedman, or the spirit appearing to me as Stanton Friedman. And I thought it appropriate to go back to the my second book, More Adventures in Eternity, where I pioneered a lot of my spirit contacts, and including ones from the, shall we say, UFO community. And 2004, 15 years ago. And I think it's appropriate background. Obviously, I've spirit contacted many celebrities like David Bowie and Robin Williams and Natasha Richardson and Dennis Hopper. The list goes on. And that proved to be very popular with people. Many thousands of people. Steve Jobs watched these. And Maitreya, of course. And the John Mack, amongst others. There was some contacts made and written about in this book, not as prior to my days of Mr. Broadcaster, But it's very good background and it's very appropriate. And I'm hoping to sort of squeeze it all in. So I'll just zoom right into September the 27th, 2004. After a pleasant, relaxing day absorbing the golden energies of early fall in and around that Hidden Valley house, Astral Gordon emerges from his daytime vehicle, observes S, still reading beside him, and shoots off for some fun flying. A clear, starry night with an almost full moon and the lights of Hamilton City almost as pretty as the stars themselves. Zooming over the waters of Lake Ontario, antagonizing a few sleeping ducks by the shore. In a rascally mood tonight, I see. This is where I would discover in a lot of OBE exercises that I'd be in different moods on different nights. And I mean, just a small discovery, but it's good to keep in mind. The astral personality does have a personality. It can be solemn, serious, inquiring, goofy, entertaining. It can be any number of things. Split from Astral Gordon into 3 spheres of light and race myself to the moon, dancing about each other on the way. It's already been established earlier in this series of explorations that my original concept of an astral self traveling outside of the sleeping physical self could split into various parts. So we're racing each other to the moon. Arriving in the orb's atmosphere, we hover and turn toward the earth. As I said to S earlier, while gazing at the moon through the trees, the only thing more exciting than looking at the moon is looking at the earth. It's so beautiful, a planet in full bloom, a brooding mother, a stern father, a highly evolved entity raising its own vibration and grappling with its new status within the solar system. I have learned not to project a human sense of suffering onto her physical self, as various interest groups would have me do. Earth offers and humans receive. This humanity understands. But because of the recent breakdown in reciprocity, Modern man does not see how he, in all his foolish egotistical striving, contributes to the evolving consciousness of the planetary being. Earth lives through its minerals and its vegetation, its seas and its mountains, its volcanoes, hurricanes, oceans, and desert. But it also lives through man in his ignorance, suffering, creativity, and joy. It feels these games of energy, geared to form. The three of us beam love back to her like little bolts of light. They bounce back renewed. That's karma, as close to instant as you want. We zip over to the dark side of the moon singing that Pink Floyd line, and if the band you're in starts playing different tunes, I'll see you on the dark side of the moon. It's dark over there, but it's not that dark. We can still see the base that many OBE adventurers have come across. Like the agency and the mafia, they won't bother you if you don't bother them. They actually don't sense our presence with instruments as they do in Area 54 on Earth. There's Area 51. Infrared and vibration sensors completely miss astral and mental bodies, but the extraterrestrials know you're about, and if they're not too busy, they like to chat. OBEs are a refreshing difference to the straight-laced military types they're used to. At least that's my impression. They might not say that to each other, but getting along can be tough. On previous visits, I've hassled them over the hybrid breeding program. Initially, I was appalled, but their intransigence made me moderate my rage. My "how dare you" attitude just bred a snotty rebuff. I felt very protective of my children, as I called them, but my demands for ethical behavior were met with denial. That human souls who agreed to participate in before birth might forget that commitment, while incarnate, was incomprehensible to them. Or perhaps it just suited their agenda to believe so. To me, it seemed like a cruel and unusual punishment of innocence, and more than worthy of the contempt I was heaping on it. My suggestion that an open, honest appeal for sperm and egg donors would result in significant increase in production rates was greeted with the reminder that your government insisted on secrecy. We were told that the populace would react with panic, and our assessment was much the same. When I insist that we've come a very long way from a War of the Worlds scenario, I was reminded that that program was already in place, and it was too late to change course then or now. The formula: paranoid, power-hungry politicians plus imperious, heartless, manipulative aliens with an eye for the main chance seemed quite operative to me. Of course, that was then, and this is now. I've accepted that deceit and mind control are to be factored into the ascension equation, and perhaps that doesn't complicate matters as much as I first suspected. Ultimately, it's still a case of "Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do," which is what he does, I'm sure. But do I, or do we? Tonight we merely observe. No visible activity from above the ground structures, yet that unmistakable sense of activity within. At first cognition, the industry of these dark operatives seems impressive, but once one has overcome that initial high-tech dizzy spell, the wonderment palls, and the grim-faced agenda of hybridization or oblivion soon becomes apparent. Then you have to feel their desperation, albeit masked by pride of achievement. Having to resort to the likes of us, those interminably squabbling humans, I think really humiliates them. We're so stupid, so easy to fool, and yet they need the hard energy and DNA we've developed over the millennia of struggle and suffering. There's the karma of overweening pride for you. A sphere of light comes over to check us out. We beam "hello there" in unison, as goofy as we like to be. Our greeting is returned rather formally, leading us to feel that our visitor is robotically controlled from within. We are examined for any aggressive thoughts or tendencies. Our clowning under this microscope takes on a subatomic style, chaotic splendor, which we feel fairly represents our status in the scheme of things. Perhaps readers want to know more of what it actually feels like to suddenly become not one, but 3 spheres of light. Well, how about silly, giddy fun and totally irresponsible frivolity? Is my energy divided by 3? Only if I think it ought to be. But I don't, so it isn't. Again, what you believe creates your reality. The inspecting sphere departs, no doubt satisfied that we 3 clowns do not represent a threat. Mere observation they are not worried about. OBEers have been seeing this sight on and off for decades, but as a group they have little mass credibility. The power brokers behind this enterprise are confident that the skeptical materialism of the media will not be broken by any number of wingnuts on the psychic fringe. And if it looked for a moment like it was, their paid watchdogs would submit a report and appropriate subversive action taken. They know from experience that silence, mocking denial, and the stressful striving for material gain are enough to keep citizens preoccupied with the daily grind, calm and continuously productive. The human personnel sharing these facilities are, by the way, transported in alien craft originating from underground bases in the US and Australia. Earthcraft not being as yet sufficiently advanced, shall we say, in power or discretion for the journey. I have a feeling that back then I did not know about the portals, the automatic transfer portals on the underground bases where you walk through the doorway and then you're on Mars or you're on the moon. That's not to negate what I said, but it was something I didn't know about. Much of the preceding information has been given in other modern metaphysical books, but it's repeated here as Physical Gordon seeks to build bridges between the UFO and New Age communities. I seem to be the only one that was doing that at the time. As they will be ascending together, he feels, why not get to know each other first? Although it is becoming apparent that the abductions necessary for the hybridization program are resulting in a much increased level of psychic activity for both the participants and researchers, much of the UFO community still reflects the materialist mindset of the societies from which they spring, and our intrepid representative on the physical plane hopes his various efforts will be in some way helpful in bringing the 2 camps together. That's the intrepid representative, yours truly. The 3 spheres race madly back to Earth, swooping and spinning about each other like the silly fools they love to be. To top things off with a flourish, they merge in the upper atmosphere and speed about the planet at about 10,000 feet, going through a day of dark and light, over ocean, desert, mountain, and city. The globe at a glance, before screeching to a halt above Toronto, saluting the Deva over the lake, and then zooming low over the waters toward Burlington Bay, and then back to sleep in the Hidden Valley House. A little background on that one. October the 19th, 04. I move backwards in time by intent to J.M.'s immediate post-mortem location. That's John Mack, who had passed suddenly at an automobile accident in England while he was either attending a conference or going to one or something. He is standing beside his prone body. I say hello and ask him how he's doing. Surprisingly well, is his answer. Have we met before, he asks, perhaps at some conference. Undoubtedly the response of someone who has attended many gatherings over the years and has met many people that he can only vaguely recall. We shake hands as I introduce myself. I tell him no, we have not had the pleasure, but I do know of his abductee work and have followed it with interest, including all the academic kerfuffle. Ah, that, he amuses. Basically, I'm a spiritualist, and I've come to assist his transition if he so cares. He thanks me for my interest. It is very thoughtful of me. To me, it seems appropriate given his lifelong care of and interest in others. The whole process is quite fascinating, he tells me. Observing your own death. You're not upset then, I ask. No, not for himself. For others, yes. It's more a puzzle than anything. I'm wondering if he subconsciously chose this exit but do not comment. The process has him so fascinated, I don't think he's had time to emote, never mind work out which emotions he's feeling. I enjoy your scientific style detachment, I tell him. It's so unusual. Well, a scientist he is, a detached observer and interpreter of human behavior. An old habit he can't give up. He seems amused by this. I apologize for stopping to take notes. He suggests I get a voice-activated tape recorder. This is me meditating, by the way, and projecting. I reply that yes, I've been advised of their usefulness in situations like this. I feel embarrassed as Bruce Moen told me this at least 2 years ago. I'm unbelievably slow at getting around to things. Spirit suggested I acquire a laptop years before I actually acquired one. That's true. I tell him I'm an afterlife guide and I can show him where to go from here. Ah, you're an out-of-body traveller. I comment that he's lightly familiar with the process from talking to abductees. Yes, he and their stories lead him to read up on the subject. He seems in no mood to hurry to move on as yet. No panic, no anxiety. I can see me coming back in a couple of days. I ask if he knew that the subject of his prize-winning book, T.E. Lawrence, was channeled in Jane Sherwood's post-mortem journal. No, he did not know while he was writing the book, but found out much later. Of course, in his community, such communication is frowned upon or completely derided, considered very unreliable. But after his plunge into the abductee phenomenon, his bridges were half burned anyway. I joke about channeling him. Oh, so I'm going to publish. At least on the internet. It's what I do. Does he mind? No, not really, as long as it's not slanted to appear scandalous. No, I assure him, it won't be a bare-bones report of his state of mind, his well-being in this process of transition. So I've done others, then. Oh yes, most recently Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. So I'm in good company then. Well, most certainly, I assure him. We laugh together. So I'll leave him from now and maybe come back later and see how he's doing. What, I'm not going to take him to his place in heaven? No, not right now, I'm not. He's having way too much fun here. Fun of the scientific observer variety. Will there be aliens about, he asks. Not unless you go looking for them, I shouldn't think. I can't tell if he's relieved or disappointed. I suggest that when he's more oriented in the afterlife, I or someone else can show him where the alien intelligences hang out. The ones watching the earth changes. Until then, I'll get out of his face. He chuckles, we shake hands, I disappear. Tuesday, October the 5th, 10 a.m. Contact quickly established, little sense of time, distance, or location. Dialogue immediately enabled. So, John, you've had an interesting couple of days. That much time has gone by, has it? 4, actually. It's now Tuesday morning in North America. EST. Well, I never would have guessed. Time flies when you're having fun, no? He smiles, chuckles. Seems to me like you're doing just fine. Lots of folk I work with are filled with anxiety about the road ahead, or even if there is a road ahead. I guess I'm so fascinated with events unfolding from moment to moment that I haven't given what's coming up much thought. Plus, it's obvious to me that consciousness continues after death. It's merely a matter of which form and expression it takes, and I'm quite happy to watch that process unfold. How are your family members and friends coping? Have you been drawn to them? Yes, of course. It's just as I read and suspected. Their emotional states have an overwhelming magnetic quality. Resistance, if I had any, which I don't, would be quite futile. Do you find yourself able to contact and comfort them? I certainly saw how empathy can be more of a risk than a help. One's being becomes swamped with another's grief. It is as if one is drowning. Surely you learned the value of distancing when working with abductees. Yes, of course. One balanced the need for sympathy with the need for some measure of objectivity. But with those near and dear, the draw is that much more intense. Advice from guides certainly helped. Now I'm told the memorial service will be something of a challenge. Souls are often amazed at the outpouring of love, I find. Be ready to feel treasured. He seems a touch bashful. Have you enjoyed the travelling around? Fascinating, as is the whole experience. One moves to the emotional needs of others, regardless of location. One is barely aware of distance, speed, or location. One merely appears, interacts, and moves on. Flying about when one has the psychic space to appreciate it is a wonderful thrill. Trees, for example, have the most beautiful emanations. Tell me, how did you get into this line of work? To be honest, John, I suspect it was a priest's training in ancient Egypt that started it, but that's only as far as I've traced it. I'm almost willing to bet Atlantis and Lemuria have some bearing on the situation. Maybe it's suffice to say I have been a shaman, priest, magus type guy in many incarnations, and I rediscovered my abilities afresh in each life. Of course, with a variety of cultural baggage to explain it. Just as I suspected, an urban shaman. This with a smile. Yep, I'm one of those New Age nut bars. I come complete with all the jargon. You realize, don't you, that you can now ask T.E. Lawrence any question you want? Oh, you think he's still around? I'd be surprised if he wasn't. Want to check out the real afterlife? It won't take but a minute of your time. Why is it, as you say, real? Well, that reality is defined by the human communities which exist there. You're in the borderland regions now, neither here nor there. Every country has a counterpart on the astral plane filled with communities of various interest groups and religious denominations. Do I have to go? You don't have to do anything, John. There's no coercion, no rules, at least not where I plan to take you. After a little further discussion, I take J.M.'s hand and whisk him up a level and move to a city. Lowest levels of cities are pretty grim, but he needs to see it. Then up to the next two levels, each with its own inhabitants and attitudes. Then a fly over Astral Rockies and down to Astral Pacific Ocean. All quite exciting. Then I tell him about Focus 27, how it's for free-thinking folks, the kind that have no overt dependence on any belief system. That's a description which seems to appeal, so we whisk to the park where I explain the setup and how he doesn't have to tell anyone he's John Mack from Harvard. He can just be any old John. That makes him smile. He certainly seems to enjoy the beauty of the place. I explain how, through imagery and intent, he can return to the earth plane and visit with his loved ones, and then, using the same process in reverse, come back here to Focus 27. I also promise to return and show him Focus 35, where the alien intelligences hang out. Our formal handshake turns into a hug, and he says, "Thank you, Gordon," as I make my exit. Wednesday, October the 13th. In the interim, I have received an email account of John and Montgomery Keane coming through at a British séance. Monty, having made a splash in British New Age spiritual circles by coming through as promised very soon after his sudden and rapid transition. I have a hunch I briefly met Monty at the 1991 International Crop Circle Conference in England, but I briefly met so many there I could have him confused with somebody else. I suspect John was greeted by Monty sometime between my first and second contact, but did not mention it out of deference to my project. Plus, I think he was just plain intrigued to see what everyone had in store for him. On expressing intent for personal contact, I encounter him walking through an astral plane university campus, New England style. Graceful old stone buildings set among trees and gardens. very Ivy League. Introduce myself and remind him of my name. He's still identified with Earthplane-style forgetfulness. When asked of his impressions so far, he declares himself to be absolutely amazed. Can't get over his astonishment. That such a world should exist, and most to live in ignorance of it, strikes him as the greatest absurdity. He will be pondering the significance of it for years. He thinks. I agree with him. It is a gap in understanding that deeply shocks all thinking souls. Why we exist mainly in ignorance of our spiritual heritage occupies the thoughts of many. And of course, theories abound. Repressed by organized religion is one favorite. A function of skeptical materialism is another. A challenge to overcome on the journey out of familial and tribal consciousness is another. A plot by the Dark Brothers, who may or may not be extraterrestrials bent on our psychic enslavement, is another. John chuckles at my list, as if perhaps he'd already touched on them quietly, but had refrained from expression. I advise him that the endless hypothesizing on the meaning of existence continues unabated here in the afterlife, at least among those who have seen through the pleasures of paradise. I tell him his communication experience with Montague Keen has been posted on the internet. He knows. He found the experience fascinating, especially after reading accounts of other-side communication in the spiritualist literature. Funny to be on the other side of the fence and see just how difficult clear communication can be. Yes, I agree, accuracy can be a real challenge. I myself am never sure just how accurate my renderings are. I just hope that there are no outright mistakes in the texts I provide. He's already heard about the communication devices in preparation. Several teams are working simultaneously, he says. How it will change the world, he enthuses. I tend to agree, but suspect that it will also throw up new challenges, especially amongst those who already feel that communication with spirits is wrong and that we should advance by faith alone. John adds that he was more familiar with the skeptical opposition than the faith-based one. I ask him how he's enjoying the food. Marvelous is his response. Far better than Earth, although he notices that his appetite is somewhat curtailed. So he's settling in then. Settling in isn't quite the tone he'd use. Far too exciting for that. Is he ready to visit F-35 as I suggested? Where is that again? Where the extraterrestrials hang out. Well, he's on his way to meet up with some academic colleagues right now. Could I fit him in another time? Certainly, I'll be back. Some hours later, I practice a forward projection on the assumption that I can now connect with the time opportunity when John Mack and I move together to Focus 35, the so-called gathering. Certainly this brings up many thorny questions about free will and the past, present, future continuum. But I have learned that I can still practice this art while teasing out the possible metaphysical and ethical consequences. Warning John that I suspect the alien intelligences could manifest in any number of unforeseen ways, and answering his queries concerning movement to new and undefined spheres, we clasp hands and move. Initially, I sense no outward form other than the wisps of iridescent smoke steam, but all of varying but indescribably delicate hue wafting about us. Is this my expectation? Perhaps. These formless spheres are famed for being completely unpredictable and endlessly mutable, depending on the usually unconscious assumptions, preferences of the experiencer. About the only constant seems to be an intense glow of light, somehow both brilliant and subdued. On the formless levels, this glow is populated by glowing spheres which float gracefully about, being either human souls, higher selves, or angelic beings of some type. I wonder if the entities observing will manifest thusly. In case I might be cramping his style, I asked John if he'd care to explore on his own. He seems enamored of the idea, and as we wave au revoir, he grins mischievously. I telepath a thought desire to interact with an alien entity. The thought returns to me as, which type of being do you wish to contact with? This throws me. I see I do not know exactly what I want. I ask for beings who see themselves as disinterested observers. Nothing appears, but a voice emanates from the mist about me. We are three, who are also one. As you request, we represent a civilization which has no vested interest in your planetary evolution, as some do, but we are here because we heard an interesting, as you say, rumor. About our so-termed Earth changes? Yes, we are interested in how you will move from isolated, egoistic consciousness to the shared vibrational state in which you will no longer be able to hide your negativity from each other. We are also interested in your transition from mortality as a given to immortality as a verifiable fact. And no, to answer your thoughts, we are not involved in the hybrid breeding program, nor have we ever been. I asked where they learned English. From your own brain, Gordon being, and we hope you trust us to learn and not manipulate, as others might do. We take your request for communication as an invitation to express most clearly to you what is our intention, and to do that in English seems the most effective tool. I said that I did indeed trust him not to mess with my writing. That would be an expression of your sense of humor, Gordon being, yes? I telepathed the smile-chuckle combination. It seemed effective, judging by the sort of wobbly vibration that returned. Your chuckles come across as wobbly to us, Gordon being. That's okay, I understand and am amused, as are we. I ask if their own culture's sense of humor was significantly different than the humor. The human. It changes depending on whether we are in form or not. So they moved from body to bodiless essence at will? Yes, that is so. Our civilization is to some extent an extended experiment in combining the two. Are there laws or guidelines outlining the movement, I wonder? Guidelines, yes. Laws, no. We have free will to do as humans, but we have advanced beyond the need for centralized authority structure. We are like your anarchists, but without the desire or ability to destroy. I wondered if that made their lives a bit predictable and maybe boring. By your standards, maybe yes. You humans thrive in conflict. We have seen by traveling through what you call time that it brings out the qualities you most seek. Does not one of your famous holy books take place on a battlefield? They must have been thinking about the conversation between Krishna and Arjuna in the Gita, where Krishna urges Arjuna onward into battle, that it might sooner relieve him of his illusions of separateness. Yes, they telepathed. Our lives are an ongoing examination of the one versus the many, quite like your discipline called Zen. And as to your unasked question, when in form we live in what might appear to you as enlarged, shiny soap bubbles, which float about in the somewhat contradictory breezes that are created by us when we are out of form. Isn't that cool? I thought it all sounded kind of zany and fun. By your standards it is. By ours an amusing pastime. Boredom is becoming a reality for us. We are beginning to see the need for a challenge. Angels from your system have invited us to ensole baby planets, and some of us are taking preparatory lessons for such an undertaking. Have you yet realized that we are the beings you sketched in your first novel? Back in 1984, I'd written a short comedy called Kissless with a Greek chorus of highly evolved but slightly bored aliens who were monitoring some of our activities, as some rascal among them had deliberately wiped some of their vast memory banks. Well, I telepathed, I guess I should not be surprised. But there was no denying I was stumped for a next question. They suggested that this was enough for now and that perhaps I should chat with some others. I said, sure, why not? Felt that wobbly vibration as they merged and faded. I expressed a desire to encounter a being or beings from galactic headquarters. A response came. They're all too busy, but I have been assigned as a representative for this focus level. How can I assist you? I wanted to know why Galactic Central, or whatever it was known as, was actually necessary. Your question is noted and answered thusly. The members of Galactic Central, as you call it, concern themselves not with the dull administrative chores you may be imagining, but with balancing the needs of various planetary cultures, assuring that squabbles do not get out of hand. Squabbles such as mineral rights on Earth, which many extraterrestrials, as you call them, seem to regard as their own. I thanked him/her for the example, when it seemed very apt. Did they continue their mining activities convinced we were so stupid that we deserved the exploitation? Some of them, yes, apparently. And some of them, while not dismissing us or interfering with our evolution, saw their own need as supreme, and calculated that certain elements on Earth were so abundant that we could easily spare some. I had to admit that this sounded very human in its reasoning. I thought, the cosmic beggar meets the rapacious capitalist. The Galactic Central bureaucrat partially concurred. Post facto rationalization had a very broad usage, it would seem. Post facto rationalization. I expressed a certain skepticism as regards the value of the debating process at the galactic level. Physically alive humans were being encouraged to participate, but other than a sense of belonging, I wonder what good, if any, it might do. The sense of belonging was, in fact, the whole point of the exercise. I was told, humans need to know, I was told, that they have a seat at the table. If they remember to show up, I added. Yes, well, that could be a problem. Will the humans needing to know stage last for some years to be then replaced with the few humans who care participating stage? That's something along the lines of what we were envisioning. I asked about members of the planetary hierarchy, such as Jesus, Buddha, Maitreya, Saint Germain, participating. Yes, they and their assistants are intimately involved, as perhaps you may have guessed. I asked if issues were decided without any human participation. Well, the hierarchy was human after all, even if they were graduated members. And he suspected that I myself had more than once sat in the visitors' gallery. This shocked me until I recorded portraying that very situation fictionally and wondering where exactly I got the idea. He then diplomatically implied that if I wanted to overcome my visitor on the periphery status, I would have to develop a much more continuous sense of consciousness, one that would not periodically be obliterated by sleep. I knew this to be true and took my lumps like a man. Continuity of consciousness is something that all aspirants strive for. That pearl beyond price, knowing where you are at all hours of the day and night, knowing where all of you is, not just some of you. I thanked the galactic representative for his efforts, and he sort of dwindled down to a dot and then disappeared. I tasted my humility for a while, and then, perhaps to reassert my status among the righteous, put out a call for one of the greys involved in the hybrid breeding project. As I waited for a response, I wondered how John was doing. Intuition said, just fine. A being that looked more like a Nordic than a grey appeared in front of me, beaming with a brew of authority, nobility, charm, and pride. Well, something like that. Certainly no shame, which is perhaps what I was expecting, or worse, hoping for. I'm here to represent the Greys, he telepathed, and I can see that you are one of the old human souls who resent the Greys' initiative as a betrayal of some kind. The Greys and reptilians are an abomination to me. I find their arguments specious, their ways deceptive and manipulative, and their perceived goals repulsive. The notion that they hold up the human dark side to the mirror of conscience is to be the worst kind of retroactive rationalization, worthy perhaps only of the Nazis. You would excuse the ongoing human practice of economic slavery? Our sins and shortcomings are no concern of yours, and using them to justify your continued rape of innocence in pursuit of physical immortality you lust after is a habit worthy only of the dark brothers you serve. You yourself have honored the divine role of the rebel angels. They serve the polarity created by the law of free will, yes, and they do it well. But the beings you administer serve only their self-interest, and the damage they inflict in the process will take incarnations to heal. Not if they forgive, as your prophet Jesus suggests. None of this supposed forgiveness would be necessary if you and your kind had not initiated the process in the first place. You would rather the greys had died out for lack of a heart chakra and the DNA it implies? In a word, yes. Species die out continually, especially when they have fulfilled their potential and served their purpose. It is no great loss. Their spirits can always incarnate in other life streams. You would condemn them then to extinction? I would suggest they taste the karma of their own choices, made so long ago, instead of deferring their fate with genetic experimentation. You are cruel, sir. You show no compassion. I fight fire with fire, and I speak with the wrath of the righteous. Compassion is received when it is deserved. Compassion is always deserved. You demean the spiritual laws of this planet when you speak from cynical self-interest, and I dismiss you from my presence. With this he faded, and I knew my victory was hollow. The hybrid breeding program was so advanced by this point, into its third generation at least as far as I could tell, that there was literally no turning back. Whether the hybrids would survive the vibrational increase of the ascension process remained to be seen, however. As many physically alive humans would not either, I tried not to have preferences on the matter. Also, there was no forgetting Daryl Anka's channeled entity Bashar, whose authoritative utterances and wit I heard at a crop circle conference in Glastonbury, some years after maybe meeting Montague Keen. He claimed to be one of the human grey hybrids travelling backwards in time from 400 years in the future to tell us, amongst other things, that the experiment had finally succeeded. I put out a thought for John. He appeared smiling. Well, wasn't this also fascinating, he seemed to be saying. His colleagues in abduction research would just be amazed. I sensed he wasn't ready to leave, so I reminded him of moving between focus levels, methodology, and bade him a fond farewell. October the 19th, 04, Betty and Barney Hill. Express intent to meet up with Betty and Barney Hill. Ask guides. Response: no, Gordon, you can do this yourself. Find them, or I should say Barney, in a lovely garden. Barney goes to a side door. These are the early abductees from the late 50s, right? You remember that? Betty and Barney Hill? The first one's talking about being abducted and missing time and taken from the car and all that sort of thing. A gentleman called John Fuller wrote a book about them, The Interrupted Journey, and they were, I don't know, in Time magazine, or I don't know, they were all over the place. Barney goes to a side door and calls to Betty along the lines of, "Hun, there's someone here to see you." Barney feels almost automatically that folk always want to see Betty first and foremost. Is this the result of being black in America in the 50s, or merely a personal reclusiveness? I'm not sure. Betty seems, if not exactly feeble, then not exactly vibrant either. Still attached to her old lady persona from Earth. We all sit in the garden and begin conversing. Barney's been here a while, but Betty just a week Earth time. So he's the one with the answers. He's had time to reflect, meditate, check soul files, as it were. Yes, they agreed to the abduction situation before birth. They had known each other in 19th century America and had interracial romance then. One that hadn't worked out too well, and were convinced by guides to act it out again, partly to give a chance to those who oppressed them before to make amends, and partly as an example to 20th century America. Betty's glad to be in heaven. Earth had shown her all it could. She was tired of her old body. Plus, she'd been longing for Barney, her soulmate, for so long it'd become a bad habit. She feels as if she's waking up from a long sleep. It's not being in heaven, it's being back in heaven. That's what it feels like. Barney has been preparing this house for her, and he's sure had a lot of fun doing it. Being able to choose exactly what you want for the house and garden without worrying about cost kind of gives you a new lease on life. He's been creating some things with his mind, but also receiving all sorts of items from the local craftspeople hereabouts. They make such lovely and unique pieces and are so glad to let you have them, it seems a shame to disappoint them. The delicacy and intricacy of the hand carving alone is marvellous. Both Betty and Barney are quiet while the other is speaking, unlike some couples who excitedly interrupt all the time. Betty asks what my purpose is. I tell them about contact and retrieval work and my habit of posting the results on the internet so that others may learn and understand. Betty asks if I'm a spirit guide. Sometimes is my answer. I ask how they feel about their interactions with aliens now. Barney's glad it's over. He wants a normal life now, and so far he's had one. The joys of church and community life without the stress of economic and social conflicts are almost more than he could have hoped for. And now that Betty's here, he has everything man could want. They smile at each other with the warmth I would expect. I sense they've discussed religious and spiritual matters already, but are not about to expound on them for me, unless I corner them with questions. Having experienced the doubt-fringed exaltations of church folk on the astral before, I'm happy to let that be. They have to discover for themselves that heaven actually lies beyond this paradise, and there's likely no point in me giving them a pep talk about it. Betty says she's still thinking over all her alien experiences and recalling even more now than she's here. Now that she's here. Barney says they planned it out before they were born, and that may be so, but she has to recover that memory for herself. I thank them for their time and ask if I may talk about our meeting on the radio this upcoming weekend on a show that's devoted to the alien UFO experience. They both give their assent and ask that their best wishes be passed along. Tell them things are just wonderful here and I'm doing just fine. Barney smiles and nods in agreement. I walk out of the garden and their sight lines before disappearing. A few days after the last